Imagine this. It's 11:47 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday night. In the soft hum of a seaside resort restaurant, a young waitress silently wipes down tables, her presence as overlooked as the breeze slipping through the open windows. Just 10 feet away, two exhausted executives are buried in glowing screens, their faces drawn with anxiety. They're on the edge of a $15 million 0 cents collapse, staring down the barrel of a do-or-die email that could either resurrect their company or bury it for good. But here's where the story takes a turn so unexpected it feels like fiction. That invisible waitress, the one no one sees, no one hears, she's about to become the voice that saves everything. In less than an hour, she'll rewrite that desperate email, and by sunrise, her words won't just reshape a business, they'll catapult her from serving lattes to steering a multi-million-dollar campaign, all because of a quiet talent that's been aching for a moment to breathe. And the signature she leaves at the end of that email? 3 simple words that don't just change her fate, but challenge everything you've ever assumed about who deserves to be seen, who gets to be heard, and who is allowed to dream without permission. This isn't just a story about business. It's a story about becoming, about the transformation that happens when someone finally sees the soul hidden beneath the uniform, when talent meets trust and doubt turns into destiny. Before we dive deeper, take a breath and ask yourself, what if the next extraordinary mind is standing right beside you, in silence, waiting to be seen? Now, come with me to the edge of the Pacific Ocean, where moonlight dances on weathered wood, and the night holds a secret that's about to change everything. Nestled along the rugged cliffs of Santa Cruz is Breeze Bay, a secluded coastal resort where salt lingers in the air and every sunset feels like a whispered promise. It's a place where CEOs come to unplug, artists come to feel, and couples come to remember why they fell in love. Breeze Bay isn't just beautiful, it's sacred, carved out of sea wind and time, with silvered cedar siding and wild lavender blooming beside manicured roses. And within this quiet sanctuary worked a young woman named Lily Thompson. She was 23 with a presence so gentle most people missed it entirely. Soft brown eyes that noticed everything, a guest's unease, the flicker of joy on someone's face when they felt seen. Her smile was brief but honest, and her hands moved like poetry, each gesture deliberate, like she was painting grace into the air. Lily's story wasn't flashy. It was stitched together with hardship and quiet strength, chapters written in the margins of survival. She had grown up just 20 minutes away in Watsonville, above her aunt's flower shop, after losing both parents in a tragic car crash at 16. That trauma had split her childhood into before and after, pushing her into adulthood long before she was ready. Her Aunt Maria, hard-working, warm, and endlessly practical, raised her with tough love and calloused palms. "Mija," she'd say, "dreams are beautiful, but they don't pay the rent." So Lily did what survivors do. She worked, she studied, she survived. She put herself through community college, then transferred to UC Santa Cruz for a communications degree, taking late shifts at Breeze Bay to cover tuition. Waitressing was supposed to be temporary, a stepping stone, but like many young adults without safety nets, the temporary stretched into years. And every time she served another wine glass, every time she cleared another plate, a small voice inside whispered, "Maybe this is it, maybe this is as far as you get." To the guests, she was just Lily. Black slacks, white shirt, name tag, efficient, pleasant, invisible. But that wasn't the truth. Not even close. Because behind that uniform was a mind bursting with stories. During her quiet hours, usually after midnight, when the world softened and the restaurant emptied, Lily would write. It started with class assignments. Then she began ghostwriting for the university blog, penning essays that stirred hearts and made people feel less alone. Her professors called her gifted, One even said, "You have the kind of voice that doesn't just inform, it heals." But outside academia, that voice had nowhere to go. Every job required 3 years of experience, insider connections, or graduate degrees she couldn't afford. Her brilliance lived in the shadows, wrapped in doubt, buried beneath plates and tips. Still, she wrote. She imagined ad campaigns for imaginary brands, wrote press releases for companies that only existed in her mind. She crafted character profiles based on guests she served, guessing their fears, their regrets, their secret hopes. Writing became the one place she could be fully herself, and yet, doubt lingered like fog. Maybe her words weren't good enough. Maybe she was fooling herself. After all, real writers didn't serve tables at midnight. But that night, at 11:47 p.m., under moonlight and pressure, everything was about to change. The bills still came, whether she believed in her dreams or not. So Lily kept wiping tables and stacking plates, collecting fragments of conversations about million-dollar ventures and cutting-edge marketing campaigns. Sometimes those conversations felt like a cruel echo of a life she could have lived, a life she had almost believed in. And sometimes, as she walked alone to her small apartment after a long shift, she wondered if her writing dreams were just that. Dreams, beautiful, fragile, and fleeting, like flowers that bloom for a single sunrise before the world forgets them. But what Lily couldn't yet see, what life had not yet revealed, was that the very skills that made her an extraordinary waitress were the same ones that would eventually make her an unforgettable writer. The ability to observe the world without being seen, to listen not just with her ears, but with her whole heart, to read silence like a second language and respond to unspoken needs with grace. These weren't ordinary traits, they were the raw materials of empathy, the secret ingredients of connection, and the very essence of powerful storytelling. She could feel when someone needed solitude, even if they smiled. She sensed when celebration masked sadness, or when someone simply needed to be reminded they mattered. Her work wasn't just about food and service. It was about human energy, the invisible current running between strangers. And that sensitivity, that deep emotional intelligence, was what made her writing sing. In the kitchen just beyond the dining room's glow worked someone who recognized those gifts. Chef Marco Rossi. 60 years old, with weathered hands and silver hair, Marco carried the soul of an artist wrapped in the patience of a grandfather. He hadn't always been a chef. Once, he'd been a successful architect in San Francisco, drawing sterile high-rises for clients who cared more about cost than meaning. But life, in its relentless wisdom, had rerouted his path. It had taken his wife Rosa's illness to shake him awake. As he sat beside her through grueling rounds of treatment, he discovered something profound. Cooking calmed his hands and comforted the people around him in a way blueprints never could. He began preparing meals for nurses, for other families in waiting rooms. Meals that didn't just feed the body, but whispered, "You're not alone." Rosa recovered. Marco never went back to drafting tables. At 42, he enrolled in culinary school. He was twice the age of most classmates and endured the raised eyebrows of instructors skeptical of his commitment. But he pushed through, knife by knife, scar by scar, until he built a new life from flavor and fire. He learned that a well-prepared dish could carry the weight of memory and meaning. It wasn't about food. It was about presence. At Breeze Bay, Marco created more than meals. He created emotion, nostalgia, home. And in Lily, he recognized a kindred soul, another quiet force hiding in plain sight. He watched her closely, not out of suspicion, but with deep, quiet admiration. He saw how she lingered by the tables of business guests, how she leaned in subtly when marketing strategies were discussed. She absorbed ideas like someone born to shape them, and in moments when she thought no one was watching, Her eyes would flash with something unmistakable. Hunger, not for food, but for belonging. He once saw her scribble in a journal during a short break. She had forgotten it on the table. Out of curiosity, he peeked. The entry was short, just a paragraph about an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, but it was written with such tenderness, such nuance, that it brought moisture to his eyes. It wasn't just writing, it was soul. She has something rare, Marco thought, as he kneaded pasta dough in the stillness of morning. She just doesn't know it yet. But when she finds out, the world will have to catch up. He began leaving small notes for her in her apron pocket, phrases in Italian that only someone with an old soul would cherish. La creatività non ha età. Creativity has no age. El talento aspetta il momento giusto. Talent waits for the right moment. Then came the night, a night like any other, until it wasn't. Fog rolled in from the sea, painting the windows in mist. The restaurant glowed with its usual quiet energy, the final rhythm of a day winding down. The kitchen hummed with closing routines, and the last guests lingered over half-full glasses of wine. Lily moved through her usual motions, refilling water, clearing dishes, smiling when expected. But in the far corner, something was different. Two guests, regulars she had quietly observed all week, sat in the VIP booth, their body language tight with urgency. The woman wore a tailored blazer and a look of fierce concentration. Her name was Victoria Steele, a sharp executive with flawless posture and sharper words. The man beside her, Ryan Parker, had the quiet gravity of a former soldier, calm on the outside but visibly worn thin. Lily passed nearby, and fragments of their conversation caught her attention. Victoria's voice trembled with pressure. "We have 6 hours left, Ryan. If this email doesn't land, Greenwave pulls out. We're dead." Ryan replied, eyes dark with fatigue. "I've rewritten it a dozen times, Victoria. I've got nothing left." Lily's heart picked up speed. Greenwave. Marketing campaigns. High stakes. She'd heard whispers all week, but now the desperation had a face and a deadline. She leaned in just enough to glance at the laptop screen. The draft email was open. As her eyes moved across the words, her chest tightened. It was wrong. So wrong. Cold, formulaic, hollow. A lifeless string of jargon pretending to be meaningful. It was exactly the kind of writing that said everything and nothing. It seemed so ample. Her pulse thrummed, her hands trembled as she set down the water pitcher. She didn't need time to think. She knew, deep in her bones, she could fix it. She could rewrite that email into something that sang, something that didn't just communicate, but connected. But even as the certainty flared, it was immediately drowned by fear. Who was she to believe such things? Just a waitress. No title, no portfolio, no permission. She walked back to the service station, trying to steady her breath. Her mind was a storm. Flashes of every writing class, every late-night blog post, every unfinished draft that had once made her feel alive. She had written essays that made people cry, headlines that made people click, stories that made professors stand up and say, "This matters." But this wasn't theory. This was real. Real stakes, real failure, real people with something to lose. And she was just Ribina. The voice cut through the whirlwind gently, like a hand reaching into darkness. It was Marco. He was standing beside her now, eyes warm with knowing. Chef Marco's gaze lingered on Lily's face, his eyes reflecting both compassion and curiosity. He had seen that look before, the silent struggle between fear and potential. "I couldn't help overhearing," Lily said softly, her voice laced with hesitation. "Those guests, they're trying to write something important, and I I think I could help." Her words faded as doubt crept in, pulling her back from the edge of courage. Marco's voice was gentle, never judging. "And you believe you can?" The words slipped from her lips before fear could reclaim them. "I know I can." Then came the crash, the wall of self-doubt. But they'd never listen to someone like me. Marco turned back to his mise en place, his movements slow and deliberate, but his mind fully with her. After a beat, he spoke. "When I was younger, I thought only people with degrees and titles could design beautiful things. Then I met a mason. No formal education, no awards. But that man could make stones speak. He taught me how to create space that didn't just house people. It held their memories, their hearts." He paused, meeting her gaze. "Talent doesn't ask permission, Karamaya. It just is." At that very moment, Victoria's frustrated voice rang out from across the room. "This is impossible. We need a miracle." Lily turned just in time to see the executives stepping out, phones glued to their ears, their body language tight with panic. They left everything behind, including the glowing laptop screen still open on the table like a beacon daring her to act. Her feet remained planted, but her heart lurched forward. Marco leaned closer, his voice like a quiet drumbeat of truth. "Sometimes, the universe puts us exactly where we need to be." 30 seconds. That's how long she stood there, torn between terror and truth. 30 seconds that stretched like a lifetime. Every fear she'd ever known clawed at her. What if she got fired? What if she embarrassed herself? What if she wasn't good enough, and they laughed at her for thinking otherwise? And then she remembered something. A line from a favorite professor in a late-night Zoom lecture. "The world is drowning in words that say nothing. What we need, what we crave, are words that make us feel, that remind us we are still human." Her eyes returned to the email still glowing on the screen. This wasn't communication, it was camouflage, cold, robotic. It wasn't just ineffective, it was disheartening. It made business feel like a battlefield, not a bridge. But underneath all that noise, Lily sensed something real, something aching to be seen. These people, Ryan and Victoria, weren't careless. They were lost. They cared about Greenwave. They believed in something bigger. They had just forgotten how to speak from the heart. Something stirred deep within her, deeper than logic or fear. It was the same force that kept her writing long after midnight, the voice that whispered, "You were made for more." Before she could lose her nerve, Lily crossed the floor like stepping into a storm, one slow step at a time. She reached the table, sat in front of the laptop, and stared at the lifeless subject line. Proposed marketing initiative for Green Wave Energy Solutions. It sounded like a spreadsheet, not a story. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The air around her seemed to still, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. She deleted the subject line and typed, "Your story deserves to be heard. A partnership proposal from Parker & Co." Already, it felt different, warm, human, an invitation, not a transaction. Then, with trembling certainty, she erased the entire email, every last word, and began again. "Dear Mark," she typed, choosing connection over cold formality. 3 months ago, my grandmother received her first electricity bill completely offset by the solar panels on her roof. When she called to tell me, she cried. Not from worry, but from pride. For the first time in 87 years, she felt like she was giving something back to the earth. She was able to listen to the rain trickle on the roof. Hear a better. Lily paused, her heart thundering. This wasn't how corporate emails began, but it was real, and real was what this moment demanded. She kept going. "Your work at Greenwave isn't just about energy. It's about dignity. It's about hope. It's about the radical belief that our future doesn't have to cost us our conscience. That's not a sales pitch, it's a love letter to tomorrow. As she wrote, something extraordinary happened. The words didn't feel forced, they flowed. Each sentence rose and fell like a tide, pulled by the moonlight of purpose. Her email wasn't a pitch, it was a promise, a hand extended in understanding. She described wind turbines not as infrastructure, but as poetry, turning like prayers against the sky. She wrote of small towns lit by clean energy and communities rediscovering their shared humanity. She wrote of children playing beneath solar-lit parks and the power of leaving behind more than footprints. And most importantly, she reframed the partnership, not as a cold business exchange, but as a shared dream. Parker & Co. doesn't want to sell you marketing services, she wrote. We want to help you tell the story already written in every sunrise, in every breath of clean air, in every hopeful step toward a more compassionate world. Let us be the voice that carries your vision to the hearts it was always meant to touch. Lily leaned back in the chair, hands trembling but eyes bright. She had given them everything, her truth, her heart, her hope. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that story mattered. The email was longer than what the company had planned, but every word justified its place. It didn't just present features, it painted moments. It didn't merely inform, it awakened. It replaced lifeless bullet points with imagery and connection, making the reader feel like they were part of something meaningful, not just a business exchange. And when Lily reached the final paragraph, her eyes blurred with unexpected tears, not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from the unshakable sense that this quiet, raw act of creation was what she had always been meant to do. Her calling wasn't just to write, but to take the aching truths buried in other people's hearts and give them a voice, a pulse, a reason to believe. Mr. Chun, she wrote softly through the click of keys, Greenwave isn't just changing the energy industry. You're changing the world. Parker & Co. would be honored to help you tell that story, with the power, the dignity, and the beauty it deserves. Because some stories are too important to be told with anything less than our whole hearts. She signed it simply, her hands trembling, with deepest respect and shared hope. Then she hit save, no fanfare, no second thoughts. She stood up, her heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears, and returned to her duties as if nothing had changed. But everything had. 20 minutes later, Victoria and Ryan returned to their booth. Their faces were taut with stress, voices low and frantic. Victoria's tone was clipped with fear. The board is in full-blown panic. If we don't close this deal with Greenwave, they're talking layoffs, big ones. My entire department could vanish overnight. Ryan looked worse, pale, fatigued, like a man carrying too many people's futures on his shoulders. Let's just send what we've got, he muttered. Anything is better than nothing. But as they turned to the laptop, Victoria froze. Wait a second. Did you change this? Her voice climbed an octave, confusion flashing to suspicion. Ryan leaned in, scrolling through the newly crafted message. This isn't ours, he whispered, stunned. Someone's been in the file. Victoria's face flushed with fury. This is completely unauthorized. Her attention was caught by a sudden movement on Victoria. Ryan cut in, a strange steadiness entering his voice. Just read it. Really, read it. She opened her mouth to protest, but curiosity got the better of her. As her eyes moved across the page, something shifted. The anger in her face softened, then fell away completely. Wonder, recognition, a touch of awe. This is actually good, she murmured. No, It's better than good. It's moving. But who? Her voice trailed off as her eyes scanned the room. Lily was still there, still invisible behind the bar, her posture calm but her heart pounding like thunder in a storm. Ryan turned toward her. "Excuse me, miss," he called. She turned, her body stiffening like a deer caught in headlights. "Did you see anyone use our laptop while we were outside?" Every possible answer raced through her mind. She could lie, say no, let it go, protect herself. Or she could claim the truth she had just poured into those words. She walked toward them slowly, each step heavy with uncertainty, but also something else. Resolve. I wrote it," she said. Victoria blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "I wrote the email," Leila repeated, voice steadier now. "I saw you struggling. I just thought I could help." For a second, the world held its breath. Victoria's face turned crimson. "You thought you could? You're a waitress. You can't just. This is highly inappropriate. You tampered with confidential." "She didn't tamper," Ryan cut in, firmly but calmly. "She saved us." The room shifted. The air felt charged with something ancient. Truth meeting resistance. Victoria stood with stiff indignation, her fists clenched tight. "March is expecting to speak with senior professionals," she snapped, "not someone wearing a uniform." Lily stood frozen, the weight of her dreams exposed and vulnerable. And then, like a quiet storm, Chef Marco stepped forward. "The clothes don't make the monk," he said in his thick Italian accent. "Wisdom wears what it must." He paused, eyes meeting Victoria's with a calm that silenced the room. "In my life, I've worked beside Harvard grads who couldn't boil water, and I've learned from immigrants with no formal schooling who could craft flavors that made grown men cry. Now tell me, Signora, who would you trust to cook your final meal?" Victoria reeled as if the truth had struck her chest. Her expression faltered, not out of defeat, but realization. Meanwhile, something cracked open in Lily, something that had been locked away for years behind realistic choices and polite silence. That dream she'd buried in college dorm rooms and restaurant service stations. It rose, and she wasn't afraid of it anymore. She took a deep breath, her voice no longer trembling. "Mr. Parker," she began. She stood steady now, her voice clear and unwavering as she addressed Ryan directly, holding his gaze like someone who had finally stepped into her own truth. "You're absolutely right to ask about credentials," Lily began, not defensive but sincere. "I don't have an MBA from Wharton. I don't have a corner office or years of agency experience or a portfolio stacked with Fortune 500 clients." She paused, feeling the weight of every sacrifice she'd made. "What I do have is a communications degree I'm finishing online while working back-to-back shifts to keep the lights on. I have 4 years of writing experience, quiet, unpaid, behind the scenes, but every piece I've written helped people connect to ideas that matter." There was a silence as she took a breath, deeper this time, drawing from a place inside her that had been buried for years beneath doubt and circumstance. "But more than all of that, I have something they don't teach at business school. The ability to listen, to really hear what someone is trying to say, even when they don't know how to say it themselves. To translate that emotion into words that move people, not just inform them." "Now that..." Her voice softened, but it carried more weight. "That's what your email needed. Not more buzzwords, not polished jargon, just truth. Honest human truth." Ryan didn't speak for a long moment. He studied her with the gravity of someone trained to assess risk under fire. His gaze wasn't skeptical. It was calculating, weighing not just her words, but the quiet force behind them. When he finally spoke, it was with the quiet clarity of a leader making a choice he knew would change everything. "In the Marines," he said, "we had a saying, The right person in the right place at the right time can change everything. Then, looking her straight in the eye, he asked, "Miss Thompson, would you be willing to come with us to our meeting with Mark Chun?" His words hit the room like thunder. Victoria gasped audibly, her hand flying to her throat. "Ryan, you can't be serious," she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "We can't take a waitress to a client meeting. This isn't just risky, it's corporate suicide." But Ryan was already beyond doubt. His eyes never left Lily. "I've been in marketing for over a decade," he said, his tone like steel beneath velvet. "I've worked with top-tier creatives, paid 6 figures for strategy sessions, seen every award-winning campaign you can name, but never have I read anything that made me feel what Lily's email made me feel." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "If she can do that for someone like me, burned out, cynical, half-past caring, imagine what she could do for Mark Chun, for this company, for all of us." The silence that followed was immense, a silence pregnant with transformation. Lily stood in it, stunned. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. But when she looked into Ryan's eyes, she didn't see condescension or pity. She saw belief, respect, a door wide open. I need to call in sick," she said, almost apologetically, like she was still half expecting to wake up from a dream. "I'll cover your shift," Marco said before she even finished. "Consider it done." "This is madness," Victoria snapped. "Mark Chun expects senior executives, not some girl," Ryan cut in firmly, "who just wrote the best piece of marketing I've read in 10 years. Victoria, our jobs are on the line. Are you really willing to let pride stop us from using every advantage we have?" Victoria sat down hard. Her shoulders sagged in reluctant surrender. "Fine, but when this backfires, I want it on record that I objected." Ryan turned back to Lily. "The meeting's at 8:00 a.m. in San Francisco. Can you be ready?" Lily nodded, afraid her voice might crack if she spoke too soon. "Call more thing," he added with a small but sincere smile. "No more L. When you walk into that room tomorrow, you're not hiding behind initials. You're Lily Thompson. Own your name. Own your voice." The words hit her with a force she hadn't expected. Not like a blow, but like a key turning in a long-locked door. All her life, she had shrunk herself to fit the spaces others thought she belonged in. Not anymore. There's something else," she said, needing to be fully seen. "I've been following your work, Parker & Co. I've read your campaigns, your case studies. This isn't just about an email. I've dreamed of being part of a company like yours." The confession hung in the air like incense. Pure, unguarded, and sacred. Ryan's face softened. "Dreams," he said gently, "have a funny way of becoming real when they meet preparation. Tomorrow morning, you'll have both." Marco, who had remained quietly supportive, stepped forward. "Cara mia," he said with affection. "Do you know why I gave up designing buildings?" Lily shook her head. "Because even the most beautiful architecture means nothing if it doesn't make people feel at home." He smiled. "And you've learned how to make people feel at home in an idea. That's not writing. That's amor. That's love." He turned to Ryan and Victoria. "This woman sees what others don't. She listens to what's underneath. In my kitchen, I call that cooking with heart. She writes with it too." Victoria finally gave the smallest nod. "When I read her email," she said, "I felt something I haven't felt about work in a long time. Hope." It was the most honest thing she'd said all night. Ryan stood and extended his hand. "Lily Thompson, would you do us the honor of joining our team for the Green Wave presentation?" Her voice was strong now, Certain. Yes, she said. I would be honored. The handshake lasted just long enough to signal something deeper than agreement. It was an acknowledgement, a welcome, an arrival. Even Victoria managed to smile, albeit a reluctant one. As they gathered their materials and headed out, Ryan turned back one last time. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to change your life. When they were gone, Lily remained in the stillness of the restaurant, her reflection in the polished glassware looking back at her like a stranger slowly becoming known. Marco flicked off the lights with the ease of a man who had just watched a miracle unfold. As they moved toward the exit, Lily's voice was a whisper in the dark. Chet, what if I mess it up? Marco paused, hand on the switch, then turned with a smile of quiet knowing. Ambina. You've already done the hardest thing. You trusted your gift. The rest is just details. They stepped into the night. The air was cool and filled with the scent of salt and lavender. The waves sang softly in the distance, like the world applauding her first true step forward. The old Lily, the one who had doubted herself, apologized for her dreams and lived small, still existed, but she was no longer in charge. A new voice had taken the wheel, and it was ready to speak. The morning of the Green Wave meeting arrived wrapped in a brilliance only California could offer. Sunlight poured like gold over the hills, crisp air whispered of clean slates and second chances. Lily had barely slept, not from nerves, but from the kind of alertness that settles in when you know something extraordinary is about to unfold. She had borrowed a navy blazer from her roommate and paired it with her best white blouse and neatly pressed slacks, yet it wasn't the clothes that made her pause in front of the mirror. It was the reflection itself. For the first time, she didn't see just a waitress in borrowed business wear. She saw a woman standing on the edge of her own becoming. A writer, a communicator, a voice that mattered. The drive to San Francisco was a quiet current of ideas and energy. Ryan, ever thoughtful, engaged her in discussions on creative strategy, authenticity in storytelling, and the emotional currency of great marketing. Victoria, still grappling with the unconventional nature of their mission, sat quietly watching, listening, processing. When they arrived at the glass and steel headquarters of Parker & Co., Lily felt that familiar flutter, a feeling she always got in libraries, in art museums, in places where stories lived. It was more than admiration. It was recognition. This is where I belong. At 8:00 sharp, Mark Chun entered the conference room with his team. There was no stiffness in his demeanor, only the focused presence of a man who had built something meaningful and carried it with pride. He extended his hand to Lily after Ryan introduced her. "You're the writer behind the email?" Mark asked with a raised brow, then smiled warmly. "Miss Thompson, your words reminded me why I started this company. That's a rare gift." Even Victoria's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Thank you, Mr. Chun," Lily replied, standing straighter. "Your work deserves to be described in a way that reflects its true impact." The meeting that followed wasn't a pitch. It was a conversation, alive, electric. It flowed with ideas about mission-driven marketing, the responsibility of influence, and the emotional architecture of narrative. Lily spoke not from a script, but from conviction. She explained the difference between selling a service and inviting people into a movement. She spoke of how storytelling could be a kind of stewardship. Mark leaned in, listening like someone hearing a language he hadn't realized he was fluent in. Then, 45 minutes into what was meant to be a 30-minute meeting, he leaned back and said the words that would shift everything again. "Miss Thompson, I have a proposition. Greenwave is ready to enter a 3-year partnership with Parker & Co. on one condition. You must lead the creative direction for our account." The room fell utterly still. Victoria froze, her mouth parting in disbelief. Ryan's expression melted into a proud, slow smile. Lily felt as if the ground beneath her had vanished, yet somehow she was still standing. "Mr. Chun," she said, finding her voice through the swelling tide of emotion. "I'm deeply honored, but I need to be honest. I'm still finishing my degree. Just yesterday I was waiting tables." Mark's eyes softened, "And today, you're the person I trust to tell our story. Your background isn't conventional, Miss Thompson, but your talent? Unmistakable." He turned to Ryan. "I trust Parker and Cole will make her an offer worthy of that talent." Ryan didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Lily, if you'll accept, I'd like to offer you the role of creative director, reporting directly to me." The rest of the meeting passed in a dreamlike rhythm of contracts, campaign outlines, and planning sessions. And through it all, Lily remained grounded, not because she wasn't overwhelmed, but because something within her had clicked into place. She belonged. Even Victoria shifted. At first tentative, then gradually more collaborative, she started building on Lily's ideas instead of resisting them. Whether it was the undeniable strength of Lily's presence or the realization that this young woman's success now meant her own, something inside her had softened. Then came one final surprise. "There's something else," Mark said as the meeting wound down. "In 3 months, we're launching a national campaign. It's going to be big. We want you, Lily, to be the public voice behind it, not just as the writer, as the creative visionary." Lily's breath caught. 6 hours ago she was afraid to speak. Now she was being asked to speak for a movement. "It would be my honor," she replied. The car ride back to Santa Cruz was a kaleidoscope of celebration. Ideas bounced between seats, strategies were brainstormed, even Victoria laughed, the walls she'd built around herself beginning to crumble in the warmth of something real, purpose. But the most profound moment came when they pulled up to Breeze Bay and Lily stepped into the kitchen, still in her blazer, her posture different. She carried herself like someone who had earned her name. Chef Marco turned, and when he saw her, his eyes filled. He didn't need the story. He already knew. "Mabina," he whispered, pulling her into an embrace. "I knew from the first moment. Today you stepped into what was already yours." Word spread quickly. Staff from every corner of the resort came to hug her, congratulate her. They weren't just proud, they were vindicated. Lily's victory was theirs. A reminder that brilliance isn't bound to boardrooms. It can grow in aprons and break rooms, waiting for someone to believe in it. The weeks that followed were the most fulfilling of Lily's life. She poured herself into the Green Wave campaign, crafting a narrative centered on legacy letters, imagining future generations thanking those who chose clean energy today. The campaign didn't just inform, it stirred. And Lily, she wasn't just creating content. She was creating change. Victoria became her most dependable project manager. Ryan became a mentor, and Lily became exactly who she was meant to be. And when Green Wave's campaign launched beneath the wide California sky at the Santa Cruz Pier, with waves lapping nearby and the stage gleaming under morning light, Lily stood backstage, hand over her heart, knowing this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. As she took the stage, her voice was steady. 6 months ago, she said, I was a waitress who dreamed of being a writer. Today I stand before you as both. And I want to talk about what happens when we dare to believe in the quiet power hiding in unexpected places. The crowd rose to its feet, not just in applause, but in acknowledgement. Later that night, she walked the moonlit shore with Chef Marco. My Nana used to say, he murmured, picking up a shell and handing it to her, that every person has a gift. Most are just too afraid to unwrap it. Lily held the shell, its surface cool and smooth. "I want to help others find theirs," she said. "A program, a bridge for others like me, waitresses, security guards, baristas, who have more to offer if someone would just see them." "Then do it," Marco smiled. "Beyond the uniform. I like that." And under the starlit sky, Lily Thompson, no longer hidden, no longer waiting, took her first step toward helping others believe. Because the most beautiful stories are the ones that help others write their own.